Welcome everybody, it's Lewpac here with another Albion Online video, and today I'm going to bring you the first installment of my brand new series called the Monthly Meta Snapshot. In these videos, we're going to take a look once per month at the current GVG and 5v5 meta in Albion Online, focusing in on what's been happening across the world of Albion in all of the continents, so not just Mercia but also Cumbria, Anglia and the Royals, what the sort of meta swing is as the GVGs have been happening. Now, I'm not actually GVGing a whole lot myself at the moment. I am currently without a team. I'm still a member of Sun, but I am available to hire as a mercenary, so just a quick sellout moment there. If anybody does want to hire me, any of my 3 characters for GVG, I've got plenty of experience in the field. I've done 250 plus GVGs since live, I believe. Probably closer to 300. So give me a shout if anyone wants me to take part in any fights, because I'd love to do it both for the experience, the fun, and to get some awesome footage for YouTube. That said, although I'm not GVGing every single day anymore, I'm still in a very unique position to bring you this meta snapshot. Obviously, I do have a lot of experience under my belt, but as a lot of you probably know, I'm also the official host and play-by-play caster of Albion TV. That means I spend a lot of time every month watching GVGs, analysing them, casting them, and I follow the top scene very, very closely. And I catch a lot of fights in any given month. It's very interesting in Albion. Obviously, we get quite frequent balance changes nowadays. Things get tweaked if they're considered overrepresented or overpowered, and the meta shifts very, very rapidly. For example, if you look at a GVG from the launch of Albion versus a GVG from today, there's almost nothing actually that's carried over from it. If everyone remembers the old Frost and Curse meta that we started with, usually the one-hand holy healer, there was a lot of hammer Hellion tanks, and it's completely different. So it's important that we have a place where we can analyze the meta and talk about it month by month, and just try and keep up to date for people who are maybe looking to get into GVGing or just on the fringes of breaking into their guild's main teams. It's important to have that knowledge behind you. So with that said, we'll get on with the video. In the background, you're going to see a variety of GVGs, courtesy of my buddy Shozen, who records all the stuff for Albion TV, provides me with the glorious footage in 4K resolution. And we'll just have that on in the background so you can see a few different GVGs that have taken place this month. So the first thing we'll talk about really is the healer situation. Currently, the meta took a dramatic shift from the one-hand holy being pretty much everywhere. There were a few people messing around with nature, but one-hand holy was fully dominant. And then all of a sudden there was this massive shift into the rampant staff. Now, the rampant staff was out for quite a while before it came into the meta, but it really began to show its strength once the Judicator armor was released. So we're seeing a lot of tanks on the Judicator armor, which gives you that magic bubble, and inside the magic bubble you get plus healing. That paired with the output of the rampant staff is basically making it easy to reset the HP of your entire team very, very quickly. The magic bubble also offers resistances and means that, a team can be right in the face of the enemy. And we see it in so many GVGs right now. You'll get players absolutely on a slither of health right in front of the entire enemy team. But inside that Judicator and rampant staff with protection of nature on, they just become next to indestructible if you don't purge them. And they just heal up to full in a few seconds. And it really, really swings the tide of battle. And currently, a lot of the fights are being decided on rampant staff usage. That the moose is loose, as they like to call it, because it's got a great moose sound effect. But the team that uses their rampant the most efficient and the best is generally the one that gets the momentum swing in the fights. There has been a number of nerfs to the rampant staff to reduce its output, and there is yet another nerf coming, which is actually going to reduce the number of ticks after the rampant finishes or after you leave it from 4 more ticks of healing to 2. If this will be enough to push it out of the meta remains to be seen, because it's still very, very big, a relatively short cooldown, and just super effective for healing everybody at once. It would be nice to see Holy represented again, but currently with the backline dive meta that we're going to talk about shortly, it just means that there's no way for Holies to get effective play in a single healer setup. As for tanks right now, the Staff of Balance is receiving yet another nerf. It's going to be actually starting to cost energy to use those Mystic Rocks ability, and it's been nerfed quite a few times. The resistances have been nerfed, area of effect has been nerfed, the healing reduction has been nerfed, but it is still one of the main meta tanking weapons. Now, a lot of this actually comes down to, obviously, Mystic Rocks is super, super good. AoE healing, debuff, and slow. Bit of bonus resistance for you. What's not to like about it, especially on the choke pointy maps? But one of the main reasons it's just so meta is Cartwheel is ridiculously OP. Now, Cartwheel is a fine ability on its own. It's a tiny little mobility. It's a knockback / interrupt. And if you get hit while you're cartwheeling, you gain a little bit of movement speed and resistance. So that all sounds really good until you actually realize that Cartwheel is a little bit janky. And what I mean by this is the Cartwheel knockback interrupt, and in fact all knockbacks in Albion, have the ability to, if the timing is right, it can interrupt things that are an instant cast, which in my opinion it absolutely shouldn't be doing. A Cartwheel can interrupt your potion, and that can literally win and lose fights. And it's a little bit too RNG for me, because you can't really time it because the abilities are instant. But when something like your evasive jump or your potion or one of your biggest abilities gets interrupted, it really is frustrating as a player, and it's leading to some non-fun situations. For example, if you have two teams, both with a Staff of Balance facing off, one Staff of Balance gets lucky and interrupts 3 potions on the other team, 3 Gigantifies. The other one doesn't get lucky. The team that got lucky is just going to win, because three wasted Gigantifies that didn't do anything is absolutely huge. So it does add a little bit of RNG to it, and in my opinion, isn't that fun. I'd like to see it fixed to only interrupt channeled abilities, but obviously that's a coding thing. But that means that the Staff of Balance really is the go-to weapon right now for tanks. You may have seen my Cancer Tank build on the build spotlight recently for the one-hand Mace Mistcaller, and that was absolutely dominating in a 2-tank meta for a little while. But in the recent weeks, I've actually seen a decline of its use. Some people are still using it as part of a 2-tank setup. I've seen some heavy maces as the soul tank. Obviously, that AoE purge is really nice against meta rampants and stuff like that. But I've also seen a few people running the old school Hammer, Hellion, Druid sandals as well. I've seen that actually popping up a few times. So all of the tanks are being represented right now, all 3 core tanking weapons. But I definitely say the Staff of Balance is still the go-to. When it comes to DPS then, first we'll talk about the melee frontline DPS. The bruisers are having a great time of it right now. It's a very bruiser heavy meta. We're not seeing so many double backline comps, and that is a lot due to the massive lockdown that we were seeing. The one-hand mace and Mistcaller combining with the Staff of Balance was just meaning cloth targets in the back were just getting locked down, rooted, stunned, silenced, and they were just dead before they could react. And the poor healers, if they weren't the target, they still just couldn't keep these guys up. So a lot of people are actually going full frontline now, and the kings of the meta definitely are the one-hand spear and the halberd. Both of these are non-artifact weapons, so cheap and easy to level, which is definitely working in their favor. The halberd's tear apart ability has had a bit of a damage nerf, and actually the halberd players, the axe players, are also using bear paws. There's probably, I'd say 60% halberds, 40% bear paws for the axe users. I really like the bear paws because they have a mobility on the E ability. So just having that little bit of extra utility can sometimes make you survive where you might have died with a halberd. But the halberd tear apart on the bleeds, and just pairing that with the Merc Jacket for survival makes it a really tanky bruiser that's able to keep itself going in the backline without the healer's assistance, which means your healer's free to just basically try and survive against enemies' dive, which seems to be the play style right now. The one-hand spear has taken over from the glaive as the spear of choice. Using that reckless charge ability after stealth and 3 stacks, people are using lunging stab now instead of the old spirit spear. stabbing away, getting the stacks, usually popping invisibility and just trying to get on top of the back line. That's usually used as the opening damage. Then the tanks will follow up with some lockdown, and then the spear guys are using Mortal Agony on the Stalker's Hood to just pierce the targets and destroy them. No matter what resistances, what healings you get, once that Mortal Agony's on and the follow-up damage is there, you're just in so much trouble, and it's not so good. Because of the prevalence of spears, and also a lot of people running arcanes, as we're going to talk about in a bit, swords have kind of fallen out of the meta for front lines because they're just so vulnerable to purge, and of course cripple from the spears will remove their stacks. So we're not seeing as many Galantines as we were a few months ago. There's the odd one floating about. I've seen a couple players rocking it with some success, but it really relies on being allowed to build your stacks and get your ease off. It's definitely axes and spears currently rocking the bruiser. When it comes to the range DPS, of course, we've got the fire mages, which were everywhere. Everybody was rocking a one-hand fire, and the fire mages started switching over to the wildfire staff a little bit, mainly for that artifact spec, because it does a little bit more damage on the Qs, still lets you have the offhand, and the meatball was super powerful on the choke point maps. But fire just seems to be dropping a little bit altogether lately. A lot of the axe players were running Night Helms to counter Firewall, and without the Firewall, the Fire Mage is a very, very vulnerable class, and those guys were the ones that were just getting trained down time and time again by the double tanks and the bruisers, and I've experienced it firsthand. It's not really fun to play a Fire right now. You need to be really, really hot on the evasion. Blink instead of Royal Jump would be my recommendation, but honestly, if two tanks want to stay on top of you, they're probably going to, and it makes it really annoying to play because Firewall becomes irrelevant with a Knight's Helm, and of course Cartwheel is interrupting most of your Q channels. The ranged class that we're seeing right now the most is the crossbow, in particular the one-hand crossbow, which received a little bit of a buff to the cast time. It's now super quick to cast. It's got a really short cooldown and offers a great amount of damage relatively cheaply. Again, it's a non-artifact, so it's not expensive to maintain like the bolt casters became. And the one-hand crossbow facebreaker combo is just absolutely taking over. If people are running any sort of ranged, most of them are running the one-hand crossbow. We are seeing a few curse mages around as well. I've seen Frogue 1 and some other teams still doing the curse, but the curse is a little bit on the fringe right now of the range DPS, and a bow in a GVG is still a very, very rare sight, and that's a shame really, because I really do rate the normal bow, and I think the Whispering bow is super good as well, but they just don't offer enough to fit them into a comp currently. Last thing we better talk about then is the Arcanes. So we talked about the double tank meta. I've even seen teams running triple plate setups with a plate arcane. And that leaves only one core DPS, like a leather or cloth guy. That said, obviously the cancer tank build is very DPS-y once that soldier's armor's up and running. But yeah, so the Arcane Rise has come about for a few reasons. People just realized the Malevolent Locust was super powerful. That is the relic tier arcane artifact, and that offers you an ability called the Void, which is a massive AoE void that expands, and it gives you plus resistance to everybody on your team inside it. It removes all negative status effects off friendlies, and it purges all positive effects off of enemies. So you can imagine the exact use of this is wait until the enemy drops their rampant and tries to heal up their team. Dump the Void on top of the enemy team, which by the way is uninterruptible. It's a hard channel, it cannot be interrupted. So dump the Void on the enemy team, and they're basically forced to reposition if they want to get any healing at all. The Nature Healer can't do anything. The only heal that will go through from a Rampant Staff is actually the Sacrifice, which they run on the Graveguard helmet. That's the only healing they'll get. And of course they can't have Protection of Nature because it will be insta-purged, so you can't even get the benefit of that. I believe you might still get the benefit of the Magic Bubble. I haven't done enough testing to be sure about that, but it's really great to see the Arcane guys represented. Of course, they've got that Frazzle ability, and that adds just damage taken to the target, so it really helps with the focus fire. So they still offer damage output, but it now relies on all of you syncing up on the correct target. You can't split your attention anymore. If you're running the 2 or 3 tank setup, you really have to be focus firing. Some teams are still running a double backline. I have seen some one-hand fire and one-hand crossbow combos that are quite good, but obviously if you've got 2 gigantified bruisers and 2 tanks all over your backline, it can fall apart very quickly. Whereas if you don't have your own dive going on, the enemy healer can just keep himself alive under pressure, and those sort of formations are collapsing very, very quickly against these dive comps. It's not a particularly fun meta right now to be playing a healer. I'm sure any healers, if you wanna give your feedback on that, I know that. And I mean, it's not fun to play any backline right now. The crossbow is probably the backline that's used the most, because you don't have to stand still for your Qs like you do with a fire mage. If you're using the exploding bolt, you obviously ping off an exploding bolt, reposition, and you have to be so careful, because the best teams right now, you know, I've been watching a lot of Crimson Imperium, I've been watching Money Guild, I've been watching Team Casualty in action. Obviously any mistake positionally as a squishy player, and you can just be insta-deleted right now. It's so brutal. So the bruisers, with things like merc jackets, soldiers' helms, that leather armor, a bit more HP, a lot of them are running sandwiches too. They're a little bit more forgiving if you get caught out. And the key to winning in this current meta really is surviving the enemy's dive. You know, if both teams are diving the enemy healer, the healer that has the most tricks, evades the best, and keeps himself alive the longest is usually going to be the one that wins. Because as soon as the enemy healer goes down, they really do have to break. I have seen some post-healer death turnarounds from teams. Shout out to the teams that man up and fight on even after losing their healer. I actually saw an awesome turnaround from Money Guild versus Sun, where they lost their healer. They managed to trade their healer for the enemy tank, so it was a 1-for-1 exchange, but they then turned it around with no healer and actually aced the enemy team, killed the other 4 members, and that was absolutely phenomenal. But in an average combat scenario, once the healer goes down, the team does rout very quickly. So healers, it's all about keeping yourself alive, and I've noticed the healers are just absolutely loading themselves up on defensives right now. I'm seeing healers running Everlasting Spirit or sometimes Cultist Robe, although Cultist Robe is very vulnerable to Cartwheel. They're running Gigantify pots, obviously Graveguard helmets. They're running Blink boots to try and get away as far as possible. I'm actually very surprised that the backliners haven't started going back to the Cleric Cowl for Ice Block. I feel that could be an option for like 6 seconds of pure invulnerability in the backline is nice. Yes, you can't actually cast or do your job, but if you can actually get the enemy to train you far enough away from your team, you can render all of those guys useless for 6 seconds. And then if you've got Blink lined up for afterwards, you might even be able to escape. So it'll be interesting to see in the coming weeks. There's a balance patch coming soon that's going to change a few more things, and obviously Merlin round the corner might bring a meta shift, but I'll be back next month with another meta snapshot for you. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe the channel if you haven't already, and you can leave a comment below with your thoughts on the current meta, what you're playing, how you feel it is right now, and what you'd like to see come into meta. And yes, I do know I didn't mention daggers at all during this. That's because they're still not being played. My boy Logic, who I gave a shout out to in the previous build spotlight for daggers, is pretty much the only person rocking them in GVG that I've seen. There may be a few other kicking out, but with no notable achievements. So let's hope we see them again soon. Right, thank you for watching, guys. Goodbye.